Okay, back with another session. This time it is 10 NL, and this is a session I played last Sunday. I think Sunday, 3rd of March, I believe. I have played a bit this week, but I haven't been feeling great, so I've been playing mostly 5 NL, doing quite well. But I figured, you know what, just stick at 5 NL while I wasn't feeling my best, a little bit tired. So, but I was feeling okay last Sunday and played this 10 NL session, which was about 300 hands or so, a little bit more. It's about half an hour long. And yeah, there were some interesting hands as far as I can remember. So yeah, let's watch. One thing that, and it was only 300 hands, so it's nothing that I can really conclude entirely. But it does feel when you play like at 10 and L, there are just less complete whales donking it off. Because ultimately, that's where a lot of anyone's winnings come from, is just people donating stacks with nonsense hands. There's just fewer people doing it at 10 and L. Of course, you get higher you go, the fewer and fewer people um, there are like that. But playing 5 and L again this week, there's just so many huge errors being made that yeah, there is certainly some pretty decent money to be made. Well, I say decent money to be made, buy-ins to be made. Anyway, waffle and waffle and waffle. Let's have a look at this session, see what's going on. Ace Jack at hearts, quite like a 3-bet here. And we decided just to triple his open, which is my standard when I'm in position. Get cold called from the big. It's very hard to know sometimes exactly what this range consists of. I suspect a lot of the time it's hands like nines or tens, which feel like they're too strong to fold, but that they're not strong enough to re-raise, to 4-bet. We go for the bet. If I'm going to bet this turn, and I think I do, my opinion is I've probably got to be prepared to blast river as well. So I might go big here and then set up a river shove. Check raising on the turn, I think, here with this King 10 overcard and a gut shot. If I'm going to have some check raise bluffs, this seems like a pretty good candidate. And the Ace Jack here, I think that, you know, like I say, I probably should have bet a bit bigger on the turn. I could bet big here. I probably don't on the 9 because I figure pocket 9s is a possible hand. And he has pocket 6s, which, you know, in my opinion, his pre-flop play is terrible. He should never be calling. But whether or not my post-flop play is good or not, I'm just not sure. But we've got a nice hand here on the left. Go for a bet. Probably could make this again a little bit larger. I think that he's going to be pretty inelastic here. Stuff like ace queen, king queen, all that's going to call. So we might as well go to say 20, 21, and that would set us up with a pot size shove for the river. This card here, if he doesn't have a 10, he's probably not going to call all in. So I go small thinking a 10 will raise me anyway. I was really thinking about what does he do with hands like ace queen, king queen. As it turns out, I think he had queen jack, which I was slightly surprised he hadn't raised on the turn. Um, but yeah, I think a blank on the river there, like a deuce, I would have just shoved. But that card there, if we shove ace queen, king queen, aces, kings, all those hands aren't going to call. But I think they'll call something like a third pot. Whether or not that's good play, I don't know. Whether that's good logic, but that was my thinking in that spot. Giving up here with king queen, you raise to get that kind of board. A lot of the time, I'm just going to be checking. Even if I have a hand on this board, I would be checking. Decide to 3-bet the sevens. I don't know about this type of play anymore. And I go for a small bet, I presume, here, just because a minute ago we get called with the sixes. I'm hoping he has, you know, that type of hand. I don't want to get bluffed off, so I bet very tiny, hoping he'll fold. But really, I'm not sure about that either. I think his hands are going to be littered with pairs higher than sevens and aces, you know, not aces, but ace king, ace queen, king queen, ace, all that sort of stuff, ace jack. So, and then he bets double the pot on the turn. So, yeah, don't know what that guy was doing. And for some reason, my HUD just keeps pinging up at random times. I don't know what that was all about. Uh, But that happens a few times, I think, because I very briefly watched just whiz through this video before, and HUD does pop up a few times. Hmm. I do have some time off from work coming up relatively soon, so I'm hoping that I can play some tournaments, and it would be nice to get one deep run, make a final table. I haven't made a final table for, I mean, I haven't played that many tournaments. I think the last final table I made was in 2020 during lockdown when I was playing a lot of poker because at that point I was actually furloughed from my old job. Um, but I haven't played a huge amount of tournaments since. It's just hard to find enough time. Usually I only need about half an hour, but realistically, if you are going to go well in them, they take 8 9 hours plus, and it's just so hard to find that amount of time available. Okay, raise it with the ace queen. Get 3 bet, and I think I like a 4 bet here. I think that people are. Obviously, I can't see what the guy's stats are, but people are going to be 3 betting somewhat light. And ace queen off is a really nice 4 bet bluffing hand. If he shoves, obviously we can just throw it away, but it does block a lot of the stronger hands he can have. And if we get called, it's very defendable. So off to a moderate start. The ace jack on the right was possibly not very well played. I think wimping out on the river, we could have gone for that. I know that's easy when you then see the guy has sixes, but it really looked like he had a one pair hand. And sometimes I think maybe I've got to go for it a bit more, size it better. And also there were some sizing issues I think with the king 10. So still work to do in those areas. Work to do in all areas, but those are areas that I think I can tidy up. Queens from the small, I like going to 12 here. Yep, I think that's absolutely fine. 11 or 12, both fine. I wouldn't go any smaller against a full stack. And those are spots like with the ace jack and the king 10 that, there is improvement to be made. There are chips that I'm leaving out on the table, both for the value and for the not bluffing properly, I think. So those hands don't really show up too much in your poker tracker necessarily because they're not massive pots. But those are the areas, those pots where I need to get better on a consistent basis, making better decisions. And yeah, that's something I think that will come with just playing more. But the volume I'm getting in at the moment isn't anywhere near enough. I need to to play more. 5 and L, I've got decent volumes. 10 and L, I haven't. Anyway, Ace King on the button, pretty straightforward raise, and it's playing very tight. The difference so far when I've played 10 and L is it's more reg infested. If you look at the tables, you see just far fewer players. On the right hand table, you've got here a guy with 74, a guy with 50 or 40 something. You get some of those, but if you look at the tables now, there's fewer. You might find one or two. At 5NL, you might find three or four sometimes on a table. So just the number of, you can see me tagging players below full stack here just to give my an idea that they're not topping up, which generally means that they're weaker. Now here's a spot with the eights. I think this happens again in the session. What's the right play here? He like throws some tissues at me. and then a horseshoe. Is that? I don't really know. I go for the fold because I think eight probably is just a little bit too weak. But what's the cutoff there? Jacks is definitely a call. I think tens is a call. Nines and eights, it's getting a little bit iffy. Because when people make that play, a lot of the time it's a big ace. And a lot of the time also it's a small pair. It's often, I don't really know how to play this hand, so I'm just going to go all in. Be very hard to believe anyone's actually doing that with aces or kings, but you do see it sometimes. And dumping in half a stack with eights pre doesn't feel good. But yeah, I'm not really sure how you're supposed to defend against those kind of plays because the play is nonsensical. I'm sure that that happens again in this session, but maybe I'm misremembering. And ace eight suited here. If we were full stacked with probably with three bet against a guy on this stack, I don't really want to three bet and get shoved on, so I'm happy just to take flop in position. Nines here, I think I prefer a call. Three betting or squeezing here against an under the gun razor and hijack caller is probably just a smidge loose. And ace eight, check. Get it to showdown. It's the best hand a lot. No need to bet. And yeah, I don't think there's any reason to raise with that eight there. Any hand I beat, I don't think is calling. So yeah, raising wouldn't really serve any purpose. We get queens again. Queen seems to be a hand that will come up again, I think, in this session. A little bit tight. Jack nine of diamonds under the gun. I think it's okay to fold that. That'd be right at the bottom of my opening range, but ace five here looks like I'm giving up. I didn't see entirely how that hand played. Yeah, that was a bit weak. Potentially a bit weak. I think a big bet on the turn there. Again, the over bet might have got that through. You are putting your opponent under a lot of pressure, and it's really tough when he just calls pre for him to have better than one pair on that board. He certainly can. But hands like king queen, probably three bet pre, pocket kings, pocket queens. We've got those. He really doesn't. Ace queen we three bet gets the cutoff calls us. I think we just go for a small bet on this board. I don't know why I necessarily go this large. Don't think I need to go that big. And what do I do here? What do I like here? I either like check or big bet. I don't think I like a small bet particularly. I think I might like to go about 18, which would have set up a pot size shove for the river. I think that's important to get the sizing right for that. When I'm checking, I'm now just basically giving up because if he does, there's no way to win. If he does have a hand worse than me, he ought to bet, and if he has a hand better than me, he's very unlikely to fold it. Um, Not quite sure what he's representing. He can have pocket nines, he could have pocket tens, he could have pocket jacks, he could have ace five of hearts for a missed flush draw. There's lots of different things he can have. Stuff like sevens and eights, and again the HUD popping up. What that was all about. Go away. Sevens here, again, either way, looks like I'm trying to lean towards. There you go. You can see the indecision there, to call or to three bet. I think I've got a tendency to lean towards calling. And it is, I suppose, the lower variance route. Whether or not it's better, I think it's probably a mix with a hand like sevens. I don't think you always want the three bet. And I think, yeah, I agree with this call. And just checking and trying to get it to showdown. I think we have the best hand a lot here. Nice. So there are a couple of particularly, I say particularly what I thought were more interesting spots. And there's one really interesting hand. Like I say, at least I think it was a really interesting hand. It'd be interesting to hear what anyone else thought of it because I don't really have anyone to. I said this at Discuss Poker with. I said this happened again. Under the gun raise with nines, and the guy dumps half a stack in from the small blind. Now I think this is probably a fold because of the positions. If that were blind on blind, I think it then becomes very, very close. Yeah, I think 10 or 11 is fine here. In the small, I think 11 is okay. But again, there, the nines. Is that a fold? It feels like it should be. Doesn't really feel like it makes too much sense for anyone to play like that. But if that's symptomatic of people with small pairs, then my folds with eights and nines are really bad. So this session, although it wasn't a particularly big winning or losing session, still lots of spots in here where I have to work out how to take the best line. And perhaps my tendency too often is to take the conservative line. And I think again there's another situation here with the Jack 10 suited. I Yeah, again, I don't hate calling. I don't think it's terrible, but I would probably like to see a three bet against half pot in position. If we had a spade or a club, I would raise. If we had Jack 10 of spades or Jack 10 of clubs. Now this is another situation where we've got a 10 in our hand. So if we're going to if we're going to call the flop, we can't just be calling hit a nine. I think that I wouldn't hate a pretty big raise here. I mean, it's the conservative option. It's not awful to fold. It just feels like my whole game is just a little bit too passive and weak, and I need to find the spots to get a bit more aggressive without, having a hand. Yeah, 10-9 off against a cut off 2.5x. Don't hate the fold again. I think certainly defendable. This session seems to have been infested with some me being at my most conservative. That won't actually last the whole session, by the way. Right. Is this that? No, this isn't the hand. No, this isn't the hand. Against a very small three bet, a lot of time ace queen, you don't like calling three bets. You'd rather either fold or four bet bluff. But with a sizing that small, I think it's a pretty straightforward call. And against three, I think I would just call. Keep in his garbage. That's so disappointing because you're hoping he doesn't have ace king on the flop, and then the queen hits you like, have ace king. Which sadly he does not. We're going to go for a decent sized bet. I don't think many players are going to fold kings at this point. Any aces calling. Yeah. Pretty easy call, I think, with ace four of hearts. Nice suited ace. And I think if this guy checks here, a little half pot or maybe even two-thirds pot with our ace is probably fine. Where we go? Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Looks like we have the best hand most of the time when the flop checks through. We want to start getting some value from club draws, straight draws, king queen, king jacks. And if we do get raised, particularly if we get raised big, we can just throw it away. Flopping a full house with the Deweys. We go for the third pot C bet and get raised. So nothing to do here but to call and then check it over to our man on the turn. Or I think it looks like, oh my God, Janice. Not a great card because if he does have stuff like, just sixes or sevens that we're raising, they're probably not going to bet now. Obviously, sevens gets that. I think we have to bet. We can check, but I think he has way too many hands that just check behind. And if we're going to bet, probably something like half pot would be ideal. Where is this interesting hand? I hear you say it's coming on the left-hand table. It's on its way. Open up with the royal family on the right-hand table. Okie dokie, here we go. Now, this is a hand that I really would be interested to hear what anybody else thought about this. So far, so utterly bog standard. We open under the gun with ace queen offsuit. Button, three bets. Now, two options in my view. Well, you could actually do all three. I don't like call. You're out of position with a hand that's, easily dominated. We go for the four bet. Looking pretty strong here. We're under the gun and we're four betting against someone who's three bets. He calls quite quickly. I think we have a standard quarter pot here. Yeah, quarter pot's fine with range. And he calls, which I'm expecting him to do with a lot of hands. Now here what I'm planning on doing is betting. I'm going to bet this, which is going to set me up for a pot size shove on the river. I think this is fine. We've got aces, we've got ace king, we've got kings. We have a lot of strong hands here. And he raises. Now here's the interesting part. What hand is this? Does this really make any sense? If he has pocket aces, pocket kings, even ace king, why would you raise? Why wouldn't you just let me blast off? What hand here makes any sense? He's not going to raise if he's got queens, jacks, tens, nines. Having a three in his hand seems very unlikely. The two threes and the four seem unlikely. I decide to fold because too often in that spot you just see a hand like King Queen, which again in my view should never be raising. Anyway, uh, I've got more to rant about that hand, but let me just look at this hand over here. So King Queen, and this guy leads for a small amount, so I decide to just call. He goes again for a small bet on the turn, and I decide that this is likely quite a weak hand. It's something. This is a spot where if I apply a lot of pressure here and on the river, stuff like 8 9, 10 8, ace 8, pocket nines even are going to struggle. As it happens, I get there. I don't know if this is good play or not, whether I got a little tilty and convinced myself that just being aggressive here was the right move. We get a great river, absolutely nothing to do here but just to shove. I've given myself the pot size bet, so finally my sizing has actually made some sense. And he folds. So those two hands there, I'm not sure about. The ace queen hand, I was sat there, as you could see on the time bank, really considering what to do. I was thinking of all the options because if he is bluffing, I was even considering calling and then check calling most rivers. I was considering going all in on the basis of this guy, but what would going all in really achieve? If he is bluffing, it does deny him equity if he's got some random thing like Jack 10. I don't know, perhaps I'm overthinking it, and really all that happened was the guy simply had a hand like Ace King, and he just, at least in my view, misplayed the turn. But the fact that he left himself some chips behind made me think that maybe he was bluffing. I very, very nearly went with that hand, and I didn't just because my experience too often is when you make one of those reads where you go with a hand that's not that great, but you've just put your opponent on a bluff. Often those are wrong, and you just end up looking like a clown. So I'm not sure about it. The king queen hand, I don't know whether I played that hand well or whether I just simply played it badly and got lucky on the river. But I decided that the guy's sizing was such that he was likely very weak, not particularly strong, and some aggression uh, was going to win me the pot. And hitting a king also made it very very easy to shove the river. Anyway, so those were the interesting spots that at least I thought they were interesting. Not always big pots in terms of winning or losing. It's making a fold or whether or not it was a good fold. I'm really really uncertain. I know there is one more uh, hand, and again, it's another spot where I was unconvinced that I played it particularly well. This whole session, I'm not entirely happy with a lot of my play, and I find that when I watch a lot of my sessions back, that I'm not completely happy with it. It's like in game, I get a little bit, I get overly timid, I think, and consistently chicken out of spots. That is really something I have to get out of my game. Okay, so the queen's on the right hand table. So we get a raise, we get a three bet. I go for the cold four, which I think is the right play. Sizing might be, yeah, I think that's okay sizing. Yeah, I think that's fine. Now the question is here, whether I just want to bet and then shove turn, whether I want to bet small and go for three streets. I decide that to go just fairly small with my whole range, which I think is fine. And now is where I think I make a bit of a bollocks of this. I don't really know why I'm checking here. If he had aces or kings, he might be slow playing them, but more than likely he would have four bet pre. So really, it's jacks that I'm worried about. Perhaps I'm thinking to myself, it's tough to get three streets out of this because what worse hands are going to call three times? And also, there was an element of me which was give him a bit of room. If he's just floated the flop with ace high or some nonsense, you're giving him a chance to bluff off. And now the king hits the river. I'm wondering whether I should check or whether I should block bet. I think a block bet might be best. Eights, nines, tens, ace, jack, stuff like that can all call, and he checks behind. What do you think he had? He had pocket eights. I was a little. I mean, I was one of the hands I thought he might have, but three betting early position raiser and then calling a decent sized four bet. That's a bit loose, a little bit loose. But again, another spot where that's not quite as bad as I think I thought it was at the time. Maybe the turn play is the worst bit. I think just bet the turn. The guy's turn jack's full. Good luck to him. You've got to get the value from other hands. Uh, I would have obviously, but if the river was a deuce or something, then obviously I would have bet. Anyway, end of the session, up $1.77. Hope you enjoyed it. There'll be more 10 and L to come. Take care. Bye bye.